Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was chosen by Kushina Uzumaki and the Queens of Konoha, Part 5. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this in common fo next part. And now let's start the fanfic. What started off with him yanking on a fistful of her hair turned to him crawling his fingers around her neck and jaw before clutching her throat. Her head was banging against the headboard as he kept assaulting her with unrestrained thrusts, making her squirt like an excited whore. Then of course came full 4 minutes of spanking, with each smack leaving marks on her skin. By the end of it all, she had her face mushed against her pillow with gallons of feminine nectar dripping down her thighs and further soiling the bedsheets. The sheer power of this ing had consumed her whole. Picking her battered body up in his arms, he got out of bed and began ing her against the wall. One hard thrust from him resulted in the back of her head slamming against the concrete, making her see stars. From that moment onward, everything became a blur to her. She didn't know how many hours he's been having with her. She couldn't even count the number of positions he ed her in. The lamp was sent sailing towards the bathroom wall due to her slapping her arms out and about. Every picture that was hanging up on the wall had fallen and its glass had shattered to pieces. 2 empty bottles of anal lubricant now laid on the floor. Her feet had crashed into so many objects that her skin was full of marks. She had even kicked the camera off the tripod stand a couple of times during their mating session. So messy was her hair that it looked like she just survived a windstorm. She kept begging him to stop, but she had clearly awakened a beast from deep within him. By the time she was finally gathering her composure, she found herself in a position that brought her to an instant orgasm. She was straddling him with his feet positioned under her knees and between her legs. His hands gripped the back of her head, locking her arms and legs, a full Nelson. This was the position that Naruto ed Makoto in when they were role-playing as student and teacher. Small globs of saliva shot out of her mouth each time his went spearing through her anal cavity. He was ing her brains out, but honestly her brain cells had all but scattered by now. Her face had contorted into a permanent, I am being ed stupid, expression. She couldn't even recognize the red-haired woman she saw in the mirror. Even as an Uzumaki with near-infinite stamina, she couldn't handle the strain of getting ed for hours and hours without once getting a chance to take a breather. The moment she verbally admitted her defeat was when her son finally orgasmed. How he was able to last so long without ejaculating was beyond her, but she wasn't exactly in the state of mind to ask questions. With a predatory roar, he blonde came inside her stretched out, shooting ropes upon ropes of thick, hot, steamy jism inside her, filling her to the absolute brim. The amount of semen he had deposited inside her could have kept a fertility clinic open for years. Her eyes were flickering like projector lights as he pulled out of her and his juices started oozing out of her. It took a good 2 minutes for his fluids to stop dribbling out of her and another minute after that for the little folds of her gaping to finally come together. For what felt like ages, she kept staring at him like he was her kami-sama, her god, her soulmate, everything her husband wasn't. She promptly blanked out, unable to endure a second longer of getting brutally dominated by her flesh and blood. No, Kushina Uzumaki couldn't take it. XXX. She awoke in a nurturing setting. Violet orbs relaxed, feeling soothed as she took a long sigh. Her huge tits were half submerged in water, erect and hard. A pair of arms were wrapped around her tummy, making her feel warm and cozy. She sat up a little, and the water started sloshing around her and plastering the base of her red hair to her bare shoulders. Wiggling her motherly hips, she snuggled against the brick wall that was her son's chest. This feels so nice, cooed Kushina. Is this your way of making it up to me for ing my brains out? No, replied Naruto huskily as he smooched the creamy skin of his mother's neck. This is my way of warming you up for some more. The color washed away from Kushina's features. Why you can't be serious, Sochi-koi. We just had for 2 days straight in which I was constantly begging you to stop. Well, you said you could take it, cheekily answered the blonde. But don't worry. I don't plan to you until later tonight. For now, we're going to enjoy a nice, warm bath. Then we'll head to the kitchen and grab something to eat. Kushina felt at ease with her son's words. She didn't mind all the constant, but he had seriously worn her out. Her was numb, and there was no way it could take another pounding. Her was angry at her for letting it get wrecked so brutally. Her poor tits had bite marks all over them. Her butt cheeks were redder than her hair with multiple markings of her son's handprint. Every part of her body was sore right now. These past 2 days had taught her a valuable lesson. Never challenge her son. That sounds so wonderful, Databane, softly chirruped the MILF. Could you give me an oil massage too? Naruto grinned foxily. Just an oil massage, or do you want a happy ending as well? A happy ending one, whispered Kushina with a big blush coloring her cheeks. I can't get over how wonderful your massages are, Sochikoi. You take me to a whole new world with them. Then in that case, it would be my honor to massage my Kaheim, said Naruto, tightening his hold around his red-haired goddess. He had learned how to massage a woman thanks to a couple of prostitutes he used to. On their job, they were asked to perform several different things on clients. A massage was one such request. However, using chakra to further stimulate the body was his own personal creation. A soft sigh escaped Minato's wife as her son lowered his hands and found her big, fat bottom. He proceeded to lift her hips until the shaft of his monster was rubbing the cleft between her thighs, parting her feminine lips with each pass. She knew he was just doing this to arouse her. He had told her he wasn't going to her, and he would not penetrate her without her consent. Instructing his mother to put her arms on the sides of the hot tub, he placed his chin on her forearms and started rubbing her back. The movement was sensual and romantic, especially when he reached her lower back. She edged while arching her back, causing hair to rise slightly out of the water. The top half of her doughy packed cheeks came into view, all glistening and perfect, with a dribbles of water vanishing inside her deep crack. Controlling his libido, he moved his hands to her shoulder blades, kneading them and moving down her shoulders, then returning to the middle below her neck. He kept going until he was rubbing the middle of her back. The lower back was where she reacted most positively. One little tickle from his finger gliding across her soft skin was enough to make her arch her back and allow that gorgeous bubble butt to raise out of the water again. This time, he sent his hands to rub the top of her, caressing the cheeks for a moment before heading back up. Content with hearing those erotic sighs of hers, he moved his hands wider on her back, so he was touching the sides of her huge tits. His fingertips brushed the upper curve of her tits just beneath the surface of the water. As she lifted her legs, draping them over his, he lifted her up and settled her on his lap. Taking her erect S in between two fingers, he leisurely played with the nubs that he used to draw milk from back when he was an infant. Her breath was coming in small gasps now, intermixed with ys and whimpers. There's a difference between a woman who's wet from having hot tub water touching her, and a woman who's wet from having juices leaking from her all over her lips and thighs, and this was definitely the latter. Craning her head back a little, she stared deep into his eyes. She poured her undying affection for him into her gaze, wanting him to feel her own raging passion for him. Their mouths crashed into each other. His tongue slithered into her mouth, darting it around, caressing, tasting her. She edged gently on his tongue, putting up as much of a fight she could. For about 10 minutes they stayed glued in that position, mainly because she was too comfortable to move. Panting a little as she detached her lips from his, she rubbed her nose against his, her eyes welling with tears. I love you, Sochikoi. I love you, Kaheim, whispered Naruto before he claimed his mother's lips again. Such was the life of the blonde mother-lover. Every man dreams of bringing his woman to such a monumental orgasm that it reduces her to a sobbing mess. By that logic, every day was a dream come true for a certain whiskered man. Kushina Uzumaki was openly weeping with her face contorted in indescribable ecstasy, but her mind was crumbling into itty-bitty pieces. The problem was that she wasn't riding the blissful high of her umpteenth orgasm because her son kept ing her, making her undergo a chain of climaxes. 21 hours have passed since Naruto engaged his father's wife in yet another marathon. Somehow, even after all the pounding she endures from him daily, her velvety walls still act as a vice on his. A civilian woman's would have been gaping for days. He couldn't recall how many prostitute pussies he had wrecked back in the day. But thankfully his mother was a kunoichi, so her body could endure what civilians could not, which in this case was his monster. Let's not even talk about the tunnel of love that is Minato's wife's. His father had truly missed out on one of Kami's greatest creations, but he had no intention of doing the same. This session began like every other, with Naruto worshipping his mother's glorious followed by him driving every milli-inch of his giant tool through the heart of her femininity. The crack in Kushina's voice told her beloved son that his head had just mashed against her cervical ring. She wrapped her arms around his neck, slamming her lips against his, repeatedly getting mama her sugar. Drawing another few solid orgasms from his progenitress, the blonde decided to end things on a high note. He was still ready to go, but she was struggling with all her might not to black out again. Even though she was an Uzumaki, her inherited recuperative powers still weren't enough to handle him. Withdrawing his monster from her married cunt, he leaned back and inspected his handiwork. Hot, white jism was dribbling out of the entrances of her abused and, as he had filled them both to the brim. There was nothing like ending a session with a nice, rich cream pie. Silence was met in the master bedroom as the incestuous couple brought one another in a lover's embrace. Kushina's massive tits mashed against her son's chest, her erect s teasing his toned pectorals. Naruto's monster was still erect, and its glistening head was buried in the valley of his mother's tits. They say a woman is most radiant when donning a UAL afterglow, but radiant wasn't an apt term to describe the goddess that was Kushina. It did wonders for Naruto's ego to know he had brought his mother to such heights of pleasure. Suddenly, the married woman's weak voice broke the silence. I told you once upon a time to find a girl like myself. Naruto gently claimed his exhausted mother's lips. And that's exactly what I did. Smarty pants, murmured Kushina cutely. But really, why me? I've read that a man's first love is his mother, began Naruto as he tucked a strand of his mother's hair behind her ear. You were my first love, Kahime. I've been in love with you ever since I was 7 years old. What? Stammered Minato's wife, her violet orbs widened. So, every time you told me you loved me back then, you meant it in a romantic sense. Her son answered her question with such a warm smile that it melted her heart. Oh, Sochikoi. She initiated the kiss this time and by straddling his abdomen and engaging him in a battle of the tongue. There were so many emotions rushing through her and she was expressing them all by making out with him. Feminine fingers were buried to the knuckles in the forest of his golden locks. She ed into his mouth as his Hokage tower rubbed against her vulva. It was near impossible to conquer that beast. How did it start? Why did it start? Why didn't you tell me before? When Naruto cut his mother off with another kiss. It amused him to see how hyperactive she was acting, especially since she was so tired to move a moment ago. Pecking her lips again, he ruffled up her long, red hair, while she pouted girlishly at him. I can't count how many times I've said this, but you were a model parent, Kahime, began Naruto fondly. You took care of me through thick and thin, never raising your voice at me and always giving me your undivided attention. Even though you were being neglected by San and were lonely, you took the roles of both mother and father with stride. You were stern in your teachings, but never overly stern. You spoiled me with gifts, but never allowed me to become arrogant. You never hesitated to shower me with affection. Your patience in raising me is proof that you're beautiful inside and out. I couldn't have asked for a better mother. His face became a war zone as his mom detonated a barrage of kisses all over him. In his eyes, it made no sense for a man to be genuinely in love with a woman and not show it. Since he was madly in love with her, Speaking from his heart came easy to him. During their breaks from, among other things, they spent hours talking to one another since communication was vital in a relationship. However, there were numerous things they haven't talked about, such as what drove him to couple with her. Kushina rubbed her nose with her sons and beamed brightly at him. Women turned to Putty with honest-to-goodness compliments, and she was no different. Raising her son wasn't all that difficult since he was such a darling to her. However, taking his confession into account, that may have been a cause of him being in love with her for so long. She was dying to thank him verbally, but knew he had more to say. Naruto had to force down a chuckle at how giddy his mother looked. Do you remember right after my 7th birthday you caught me looking at a set of ninja armor through a shop window? The Uzumaki matriarch put a finger to her chin, running through her memories until she remembered that exact moment in time. With a gorgeous smile, she nodded at her beloved son. I had already gotten a gift from you, so I didn't ask for the armor because I didn't want to be greedy. You still surprised me with it, saying that it was a present for loving your mother, finished Kushina softly. Naruto tightened his hold on her. Those words affected me in ways I can't describe. I never told you then, but that was the moment I started falling in love with you. My baby had a crush on me, whispered Kushina with a cute blush coloring her cheeks. No wonder why you used to follow me around all the time. A nod was administered by the blonde. It was also a difficult time for me because I would feel a scorching pain in my chest every time you kissed Tusan. This earned a gasp from his parents since it activated her maternal instincts. Don't feel bad, Kaheim. You couldn't have known about my feelings back then. Hell, I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. It pained her that she was the cause of his heartache, but it did explain his possessiveness. On the other hand, her son was absolutely adorable back then. She giggled as she imagined the chibi blonde puffing out his cheeks in jealousy. Naruto shot her a playful glare and crossed his arms, bringing her out of her funk as she held her tummy and started laughing to her heart's content. Once she had calmed down, Kushina intertwined her fingers with her son's. When did you truly realize your feelings for me? It was a few months after that incident if I recall correctly, said the blonde wife-stealer. The two of us were walking around the village and stopped by Inorioba-san's flower shop. She teased you about being on a date with her maelstrom. Kushina blushed a little at this. Back then, all she talked about was her son. She would go on and on about how proud she was that he spoke his first word, how sad she was when his father didn't show up on his 5th birthday, how excited she was that he was so gifted in Fuinjutsu. All her friends would chuckle at her expense and wouldn't hesitate to tease her about her obsession with her son. But now that she thought about it, her friends were right about her obsession, not that she would ever tell them that. That to me was confirmation that what I felt towards you wasn't a silly crush. I was a son who not only worshipped the ground his mother walked on, but was also in love with her. The Junin paused here to exhale softly. This has been 11 years in the making. What could she even say in response to that? The redhead took a moment to picture the lengths her child must have gone to win her over. There were still a multitude of questions that were left unanswered. He said their eventual coupling has been 11 years in the making. What sort of things did he plan for all those years? That romantic dance she had with him was the straw that broke the camel's back. Was that a part of his plan? But all those questions faded as the memories of her sonning the living shit out of her best friend came back to her in a flashback. If Naruto was in love with her, then what was his purpose for having with Makoto? Was it to gain experience? Who initiated it? The most important question was whether Naruto was still attracted to Fugaku's wife or not. She didn't want to admit it, but it was clear from what she saw in that mating session that the two were in love. It was in their eyes and in every thrust Naruto made inside Sasuke's mother's tight little. On the off chance that she was wrong, and by Kami did she wish she was wrong, that her son didn't reciprocate such feelings, there was no way Makoto could walk away from Naruto's monster. This was why she allowed her son to take her anal virginity. She endured the excruciating pain of getting her stretched to ridiculous levels because she didn't want him to crawl back to Makoto. The thought of her best friend stealing Naruto from her was the reason why she deferred from her wedding vows and began cheating on her husband in the first place. Red tresses started hovering in the shape of 9 tails as Kushina possessively grabbed her son's hand. No one, not even Kami-sama, can separate her from the true love of her life. Having sighted the summoning of the red-hot habanero, Naruto knew he needed to defuse the situation immediately. The boundless in romance was fine and dandy, but their relationship was still shaky. Unlike the no secrets rule he had with Makoto, there were countless things he hadn't revealed to Kushina. How could he explain to her that she would have to share him with Sasuke's mother? Thankfully, a plan hatched in his head without him even putting a second's thought into it. "It's 3 o'clock," said the blonde, and his words broke his companion out of her trance. "It's time, Kaheim." A shaky Kushina lowered her gaze. Cream was bubbling out from the pores of her erect S. Violet orbs softened until tears started leaking from the corner of her eyes. After 13 long years, he stopped at the age of 5, she was lactating again, and it all thanks to her son. Apparently, he had acquired pills which can manipulate her hormone prolactin levels. She didn't care about any of the side effects he told her about. All she was concerned with was the fact that these pills can mimic the processes that occur during pregnancy, such as her engorging with milk. Brushing away his mother's tears, Naruto pecked her lips. "Where in the house did you feed me the most?" "It was, right here, this room," whispered the emotional lady. Helping his parents sit upright, Fugaku's master proceeded to lay across the bed with his head resting on her warm lap. His cervix killer was still fully erect since the thought of being fed by his mother was arousing beyond belief. Kushina leaned down and her enormous tits hung down over her son's eager face. She laid a hand under his head, like she used to do when he was a child. "Itadakimasu." Grabbing her left by wrapping both hands around at the base, he gently pulled out and squeezed towards the. Kushina's teeth started chattering from the insane pressure bubbling in her big, juicy tits. Thankfully, Naruto knew exactly what he was doing. After all, he had devoured more milk from Makoto's S than she had produced for her children back when they were infants. He gently her left and then blew on it, causing it to expand before his very eyes. He then took the into his mouth and started to, working his mouth to prepare her for nursing. Reaching up, he softly caressed both her S, sending tingles throughout her body. With a quick tug, he released her and took note of how red and engorged it was. He then took his tongue and lapped it around in circles, before drawing it into his mouth to work it further. Then it happened. The pressure building from his mother's tits became too much, causing milk to squirt from her S. Naruto wasted no time in tightening his lips around her right tit, engulfing her entire areola in his mouth. He was rewarded with a warm homemade stream of milk that shot out like a balloon with a pinhole and went splashing down his throat. His eyes widened briefly before squeezing tight in pleasure as he savored the drink like a fine wine. This was one of the most delicious drinks on Kami's green earth. Thankfully he had stopped milk from gushing from her left tit by shutting the tight in between 2 fingers. Groans of delight escaped him as milk continued to flood his mouth. That's it, my baby," sobbed Kushina, riding the high of a lactation-induced orgasm. It was common for mothers to get aroused while feeding their children because they can be overly sensitive for most women. Lactation was intense for her because her S have always been sensitive. And when her S are filled with milk that needs to be squeezed out, well, there's nothing like it. It didn't help that Minato was never around, meaning she would remain horny all day round since Naruto was a big fan of her milk. Lactation was also overwhelming for her because it was like a trigger to her maternal instincts. She felt complete as Naruto drank from her S because it made her feel like she was nourishing life from her S. Nursing him again after all these years was warming her heart and simultaneously her emotions mixing between motherly love and incestuous lust. DDD, do you mind if I call you Naru-chan for now? Stammered the redhead with her breath coming in short bursts. I want to go back to the time when you were my darling little Naru-chan. Releasing the tit from his mouth, Naruto whispered a soft, of course, Ka-chan. A steady stream of juice oozed out of Kushina's snatch to hear that her son was so on board with her request that he was calling her Ka-chan for this momentous occasion. She threw her head back and began running a hand through the blonde spiky hair, just like she used to do when he was a baby. Go on, Naru-chan, pleaded the mother. Please keep drinking Ka-chan's milk. Naruto enclosed his lovers between his lips and went back to ing on it. A high concentration of lactose is what makes milk so sweet. That's why Naruto had encouraged her to drink as much milk as possible for the past 48 hours. Not only did her milk taste as sweet as honey, it was highly nutritious, giving him all the more reason to milk her dry. After 20 minutes of hungry ling, the blonde mother-lover decided to slow down his pace. Not only did the pace become slow, it was like time itself had slowed down, and the world began to shrink to just being all about his mouth working her for its nourishment. All he wanted out of life right now was to savor the feeling of closeness with his mother and the taste of her rich milk. He ate firmly, gulping down mouthful after mouthful, perhaps symbolically taking in a piece of Kushina Uzumaki herself as a sort of parting keepsake. It was clear why he loved being nursed by her as a child. Naru-chan, whispered Kushina emotionally. With one hand under his head, she reached his monster with her free hand. It took both hands to fully capture the thickness of his, so obviously she couldn't stroke him the way she wanted to. Wrapping however much of his rod she could gather into her shaky palm, she started sliding her hand up and down. This was a magical moment for the incestuous couple. Now that precum was oozing from his urethra and seeing as he hated wasting a perfectly good erection, Naruto was dying to embrace some sweet MILF again. Releasing his mother's hand from his and her tit from his mouth, he sat upright and leaned against the headboard. I'm feeling homesick, Ka-chan. Can you help me get back home? Cooed the blonde with such unrestrained lust that it made his throb. Her son was invoking forbidden desires from the darkest parts of her mind and it was making her head spin. She was still painfully sore from their recent 21-hour-long session. Now he wants to her again. Her and both need a few more hours of recuperation before she can take another pounding. It didn't help her case that her hormone levels were being manipulated by those feeding pills. Ultimately, she wasn't able to fight off the animalistic gleam in his eyes. Oh, of course, Naru-chan, purred Minato's wife as she stood on either sides of her child's legs before slowly dropping her hips. Come home to Ka-chan. Kushina's eyes rolled to the back of her head as she stabbed herself with her son's tower of meat. Tremors ran through her entire body, but she bore through the discomfort until he was balls deep inside her. Deciding to get comfortable, she wiggled her hips and her big, fat ballooned out on his thighs. In that moment, their incestuous love skyrocketed like a flash of lightning. Bringing her arms around his neck, she leaned in and claimed his lips, kissing him with all her affection. Gasping for breath, the Uzumaki matriarch pulled away from the blonde's lips, only for him to pounce on her chest. She whimpered as he massaged and squeezed her mammaries with his hands before settling into a firm ling rhythm. The pace at which he was going worried her because she didn't know if she had enough milk to sat his needs. However, at no point did it seem like her milk was going to run dry because pressure kept building in her tits, thus keeping them at full capacity. Perhaps this was why he had informed her to drink at least 10 liters of milk over the course of the past 48 hours. She would have to ask him about it at a later date. She had long since surrendered to the tingles of heat he was eliciting in her body, and those tingles had quickly evolved to broader waves of searing sensuality. Mentally apologizing to her sore in advance, she began lifting and dropping her hips. She slowly rode him like the good cowgirl she was and chanted his name like a mantra, encouraging him to keep drinking her nutritious milk. His ling intensified, his lips loosening a bit and then retightening around her thick in rapid cycles. Her breathing was coming in short bursts. It took all her strength not to tell him to stop going slow and start mauling her tits like a demon possessed. Getting together with him helped her realize that hardcore doesn't necessarily mean a couple don't love each other. Sometimes, a rough session can help express feelings better than words can, was magical like that. So lost taking a trip down memory lane, she wasn't aware that he was circling her with his ring finger. This also had to do with the fact she was gushing yet another wave of juice. Then, her world came to a screeching stop when he suddenly released her tit from his mouth and squeezed one so hard that milk erupted from the pores of both her s. His entire face was sprayed with thick, rich milk. She couldn't look him in the eye with how hard she was blushing. To toss fuel into the fire that was her burning loins, he shoved 2 fingers up her Naruto-chan. Her jaw dropped to comical levels and tears started welling in her eyes. The force behind her son's fingers penetrating her made her start bouncing up and down on his monster like a wanton. The pressure of her grinding was crushing her. Like it wasn't stimulating enough that he was draining her tits of her milk. His 2 fingers were now buried all the way up to the knuckles and were scraping the jelly of her anal canal. This was too much pleasure for her. "Can we do this again, Ka-chan?" exclaimed Naruto, after which he went back to ling her lactating marshmallows of flesh. It was immensely pleasurable to be engaged in such a taboo roleplay with his mother. If only she hadn't stopped nursing him. But now that he was once again indulging in his pastime as a child, he couldn't imagine stopping ever again. "We're going to do this every day, Databane," cried Kushina with genuine ecstasy in her voice. She began gasping for breath while clenching her as tight as she could. The reaction met from the man she was cheating on her husband with was immediate, and it made him bite her, making her gush from both her tits, and having non-stop with him for 2 weeks was bound to help her learn a trick or two. Another hour into this, and Kushina hit her 15th orgasm of their latest session. Her mind was blank, her eyes were fogged up with intense lust. It astounded her that she still had milk in her s and that her son has been ling her non-stop for the past hour. Pulling his face away from her s, she drew him in for a passionate kiss. She could taste her milk on his lips, but she didn't care. The arousal she was in was screwing with her mind. She ed on his bottom lip like he had been ing her lactating tits. Her greedy tongue went spearing through his mouth, and from there the two engaged in an intricate dance of the tongue. They kissed with reckless abandon, like the kiss between lost lovers when they find each other. Her started clenching harder now, but this time it was because she was nearing yet another mind-numbing orgasm. Cerulean blue orbs and violet orbs both shared a hungry gloss as the mother and son separated. Bands of saliva clung between their lips, which Kushina hungrily lapped up. Ys filled the bedroom as she'd her lips like the satisfied lioness she was. This was just a glimpse of the changes she's gone through now that she's cuckolding her husband and is with a man who can actually handle the red-hot habanero. However, Naruto was still too much for her. With each rocking motion she was sent into incredible heights of ecstasy until the pleasure became too great for her mortal body to handle. I'm come mmminnnnnggggggggggg. Kushina had a running theory that she would never have the greatest orgasm with her son because he was somehow able to make her achieve an even greater orgasm afterward. Her theory was once again proving true. This wave of pleasure and release seemed to start in 3 places at once. It first started up an almost unbearable pressure in her milky tits, making her fear they were going to explode. Next, it radiated out from her stomach like a hot aching itch. Finally, the wave originated from her toes and traveled up her feet through the arch and into her calves and thighs. Her muscles tightened and froze as though her body was in one big, glorious cramp. And then, there it was, the sudden release and almost seizure-like spasmodic convulsion of all her muscles. Her s squirted milk as she threw her head back, crying out to the heavens with an insane heat flushing creeping up to her neck and almost burning her face. Naruto responded to his mother's blood-curdling scream by exploding inside her tight little ropes upon ropes of thick, Hot jism rocketed from his urethra and collided with the juices she was gushing. It was like a clash of titans when the releases sloshed around inside Kushina's vagina. Both parties saw white from having released a tremendous amount of fluids. Their collaborative cream began running down his shaft, heavy testicles, until it sank down on the sheets. Unable to handle such ungodly pleasure, Minato's wife passed out with her tongue sticking out the corner of her mouth like an exhausted dog. Once again, she proved to be no match for her kami of a son. But Naruto didn't stop ling his unconscious mother. He just kept drinking milk without a care in the world. XXX. Messy stacks of important documents were spread out across his wooden desk. His office was dark and stuffy, but he just didn't give a. His blonde, spiky hair looked messier than usual, but that's because he hasn't showered for the past 3 days. His cerulean blue orbs were tinted red as he hasn't had a good night's sleep in 3 weeks. Moreover, his shirt was unbuttoned, his pants dangling around his ankles. In between his smelly legs, which was due to dried up jizz, was his infamous micro. Anyone who saw a man of his stature like this would have turned away in shock and disgust. However, no one is immune from addiction. It afflicts people of all ages, races, classes, and professions. That's because an overindulgence of anything, even something as pure as water, can intoxicate. The Hokage's addiction had become excessive masturbation. A cuckold's diary has forever changed him. He had memorized every page, every passage. There wasn't a scene in that book he didn't know by heart. It flabbergasted him how many positions Ruto took Rei, the protagonist's wife, in. What he wouldn't do to see that brutal ing up close. Just thinking about it reminded him of Kushina wanting to try out the cowgirl position. That led to him busting a nut in 40 seconds. Minato knew he could only hit his personal best, 2 minutes, which was via missionary position, so he refused to entertain his wife any other way. From what he had read in a cuckold's diary, Ruto was ing Rei at least 10 hours a day for 2 straight. Some of those sessions even lasted a full 24 hours. However, since this was a fictional book, he automatically assumed that not even Kami-sama could last that long in bed. That was until he summoned Jiraiya into his office. A month ago, Minato would have taken a secret of this magnitude with him to the grave. He was a reserved person who spoke only when spoken to, so blabbing was out of character for him. The unfortunate truth was that his mind was corrupted with thoughts of Netarare porn. Demanding an answer out of his former teacher showed him exactly how far he had fallen. It took all he had not to break down when Jiraiya shot him a look of pity. Thankfully, the aged man didn't ask questions. There wasn't even a hint of joy that he was finally reading Make-Out Paradise novels. It didn't help to receive Jiraiya's confirmation that not only was Ruto as well endowed as mentioned in the book, but the man was able to last even longer than illustrated. Among his other notable feats in bed was the fact Naruto had just recently nailed his mother for 3 days straight, not that his father knew anything about that. Before leaving the office, the Toad Sage told Minato that he was heading out of town to meet with a client from his spy network. He also gave the man a few gifts and he could see the blonde's face contorting with glee. Jiraiya had to hand it to his apprentice for being able to predict so far ahead into the future. How Naruto knew Minato would act this way to reading a cuckold's diary was beyond him. Having played his part, he vanished from the office, when in actuality he hid himself in the invisibility cloak. Thanks to the super pervert, Minato had scored himself 10 new Netarare novels. He had long since forgotten his paperwork. One day flew by, then another, then another. He was supposed to stay in the Anbu headquarters for only 1 week, but he's been cooped up here for 3 weeks now. He had even ordered his guards to remain outside the office because he needed complete privacy, and that he wasn't interested in moving back into the Hokage's tower right now. His addiction was evolving into a dark obsession. He had every opportunity to head home and visit his wife and son, but decided against that so he could go on a Netarare marathon. That was 3 days ago. When life gives you S, you make aid. What you don't do is bend over for dozens of horndogs. It wasn't like I wanted to sell my body, but my husband and I had fallen on hard times. He had just lost his job and our kids were about to start school in the fall. The economy was shaky at best and unfortunately no one in a 20-mile radius was hiring. Next thing I knew I was approached by a pimp, leading me to make the most difficult decision of my life. To whore or not to whore? That was the question. When I was left with no other choice, I told my husband that I was waitressing at a bar and was assigned graveyard shifts. That left him with tucking the kids into bed, and left me with a new male to lay with every night. What wife does that? I could see why the pimp chose me to be a hooker. I was fairly young, had a petite figure, but contradictorily also had a giant. It was the one thing I used to hate because I would frequently bump into stuff and often break expensive things whenever I would make a sharp turn. On top of that, it was too huge for my body and I hated that I could feel my butt cheeks jiggling with each step that I took. The only relief was that clients didn't mind it. Hell, most of them loved it. The only part of my body I liked was my huge tits. Even my mother was jealous of my girls. I used to call my a beautiful flower, a sacred temple that only my husband had visited. Now it was anything but precious. My one-way street was now a highway full of traffic. I was grateful for the pencil clients who used to book me for the night because that allowed me to keep my tight. Then one fateful day came the man who completely ruined me for my husband. His name was Ruto. I am Nakano Megumi, and this is my story. This scene was from Makeout Paradise, a streetwalker's adultery, and its plot revolves around a beautiful prostitute who Naruto used to. The woman's real name wasn't Nakano, it was Hatsuki. Although Naruto had ruined her for her husband, she was offered a boatload of money for speaking about her UAL adventures with the blonde. The payment Jiraiya made to her was enough to get her to stop whoring herself out and finally live life as a full-time housewife and mother. Despite this, Hatsuki did reach out to Jiraiya to see if Naruto was interested in sleeping with her from time to time. She had tried her very best, but her husband just couldn't match the standards that the whiskered shinobi had set for her. The blonde did give her one last brutal which left her paralyzed for 4 days, but that was the last time he ever saw the MILF. Naruto had gotten together with Makoto soon after that, so he told Jiraiya to keep him out of the prostitute loop. Those days were long behind him. The Hokage's secretary paused here and gazed at her leader with pleading eyes. No one would have believed her if she said the yellow flash was masturbating to her reading aloud a Netarare novel. But that was the damn truth. His image had become distorted in her mind. When he had summoned her into his office earlier, she didn't think he would order her to perform such a degrading task. She started working for him 6 years ago and have always thought of him as a kind person. The fanatical manner in which he made his request genuinely scared her. While this was a form of UAL harassment, she was thankful he didn't make any advances on her. Had he laid a hand on her, there was not a damn thing she could have done about it. After all, the legal system is biased towards ninja. The Hokage can order a 5-year-old genin to murder his parents on a bullshit charge of, just get it done, bitch, and it would be considered justified. There's no democracy in Konoha, there's only a dictatorship. The Hokage tells his subordinates to jump, and they ask how high. Civilians don't hold power in a ninja village, and a council full of them simply cannot exist. Unless of course one is reading a retarded fic. As a middle-aged woman, this job used to be the light to her dark. Today was the first time she was honestly thinking about handing in her resignation. Sadly, her boss wasn't going to listen to reason, especially in the crazed state he's in. He had ordered her to SSS rank secrecy. Speaking about it meant, in the best case scenario, that she would get tortured, interrogated, tortured some more, and then get thrown into the roughest prison in Fire Country. She didn't even want to think about what would happen to her in the worst case scenario. Go on, said Minato coldly, his hand tightly gripping his baby. Ordering his secretary to read this novel to him would come to bite him in the day. He knew this, but he couldn't help himself. Out of the 10 novels Jiraiya had left for him, he went through 4 of them in just the past 3 days by pulling all-nighters. His obsession was darkening with each passing day, yet he was welcoming it like fresh air. Sadly, reading alone was becoming lackluster for him, which was why he wanted to hear someone else read the novels for him. Part of him wanted Kushina to do this for him. She was his wife and she had vowed to be there for him in sickness and in health. Well, this was his sickness and she should help him through it. The logical side of him argued that he should never inform her of his love for novels starring cuckolded men. He cringed at the mental image of her beating the shit out of him for even making such a request. Ultimately, he rang his secretary because having another woman read this to him didn't exactly register as cheating in his eyes. He was as tall as my husband, but they were poles apart in terms of physique. I could tell he was a shinobi, but he wasn't lean like most shinobi I've had with. I wish I could have gotten the time to admire his gorgeous, muscular build, but after taking off his shirt, he immediately went about yanking down his trousers. To paint a graphic picture, the head of his monster was thicker than my balled-up fist. My first reaction was to make a beeline for the door, and I did just that while crying for help. Can you blame me? Ruto's ungodly large dwarfed every single client I've ever been with. That thing was enormous on all counts and it was making my want to seal itself shut. I was simply not enough woman to handle something of that size. Unfortunately, that wasn't my choice to make. As expected, he split me wide open. The inner lining of my labia got torn from the penetration and I sat there crying and bleeding. Every 10 seconds or so I would beg him to stop pushing so I could take a small breather. Even with a few inches out of me I could feel his head brushing against my cervix. I had never imagined that deep penetration could bring me such excruciating pain. I had given birth to 3 children, but accommodating this was proving to be a far more daunting task. Thankfully, every working girl was taught a bit of medicinal ninjutsu, so I was able to heal myself fairly easily. Ruto had my husband beat in every way conceivable. His stamina was unlike anything I've ever seen. The longest a client of mine had lasted was 20 minutes, but hours were flying by and Ruto was showing no signs of fatigue. I can't count the amount of times he made me pass out. He shot more seed into my womb than all my clients put together. With him, I was not a prostitute. I was a woman who had just found a new deity to worship. My golden rule was to have with a client once and never again, but Ruto had opened up Pandora's box. Maybe that's why I told my husband that I was working out of town for the weekend, when in fact I had begged Ruto to book me for the next 3 days and nights. We ed for hours on end, with each round better than the last. My was a gaping hole by the time he was done, but I couldn't have cared less. Ruto had truly ruined me for my husband. This book was amazing in the Hokage's opinion because it was presenting the perspective of the woman, which was a breath of fresh air from the other Netarare books he's read. It was helpful to visualize the seduction of the married woman before delving into the point of view of the cuckold husband. The only complaint he had so far was the lack of graphic scenes. However, seeing as this was a make-out paradise novel, he knew the humiliation parts were just around the corner. Yes, groaned Minato while stroking his itty-bitty PP. Keep reading, but refrain from being monotone, show enthusiasm. I want you to sound like a wife cheating on her husband. Kimiko set another concerned glance at her masturbating leader while chewing on her bottom lip. How exactly was she supposed to sound like a cheating wife? Not once in her life had she cheated on her husband, so it wasn't like she had experience to draw from. All she wanted to do after this was go home, forget this ever happened, and take a long, long shower. It was making her sick to see him wanking so freely like this, but sadly she had no choice but to let him toy with his tiny. Gathering her composure, she nodded her head and began reading the next scene of the book. Sitting by the west corner of the office, Jiraiya, hidden under the invisibility cloak, sighed at the pathetic sight of his former student. Multiple cameras were set up in the office, mounted on all corners of the room, but hidden under a discreet genjutsu. Everything that has gone down in this office has been and is still being recorded. The cherry on top was the fact all this footage is being analyzed in real time by a team of the blonde mother lover's shadow clones. Naruto was always multiple steps ahead of his father. Another sigh escaped Jiraiya as he went back to scribbling on his research notebook. I was hoping you wouldn't break, but it looks like you're not going to survive getting cuckolded, Minato. These past 3 days have given him a plethora of material for his next book. Make Out Paradise. A Father's Devolution. XXX. You're so cute, Kaheim. A blushing Kushina pulled the covers over her head, hiding from her son. 45 minutes have passed since Naruto wrapped up his latest mating session with the woman who gave birth to him. The drowsy side effect of the feeding pills would often kick in for Makoto 6 hours into taking them. Since that session had lasted nearly 7 hours, he assumed that Kushina would be feeling the fatigue soon. There was also the matter of possible migraines from taking those pills. Hence, he decided to bring her a cup of chamomile tea. But ever since he entered their room, she's been acting strange and refusing to look him in the eye. Naruto chuckled at his lover's antics and sat by the edge of the bed. So, what's the matter? MHMMHMHMMH. I don't speak mumble, said the blonde, earning a muffled cry from his mother. Okay, what's wrong? Hesitantly, the Uzumaki matriarch's head popped out from the covers. What we did. You mean me drinking your milk? And no, that was really hot, stammered the atomic red kunoichi, her throbbing from the mere recollection. We were. Taking a deep breath, she glared at her son. Our roleplay. Databane. Naruto arched a brow. Roleplay, repeated the blonde. What about it? Minato's wife said nothing in response, but the silence was what earned Naruto the answer he was looking for. So I take it you're still coming to terms with calling me Naru-chan while feeding me. The man's lips curled into a foxy grin to see his parent nodding along. Oh, that's so cute. It's not funny, Sochikoi, cried Kushina. I thought of you as a baby ling me and then I was riding your. Do you want to call me Naru-chan right now? Asked the whiskered adult, only to receive a negative shake of the head. So then why the long face? What we did back there was just fantasy, Kaheim. Kushina stared at her son with teary eyes. Fantasy. Unable to resist such an adorable MILF, Naruto yanked the covers off his mother and pulled her into his arms. Hi, whispered the Namikaze heir. Fantasy is often overlooked or disregarded as an important element of ualiti, when in fact it's probably one of the most important parts of the UAL experience. It's human nature to want to stay within certain boundaries, but it's natural for the mind to want to explore uncharted territories. Minato's wife looked up at her son with awe, captivated with his words. It soothed her heart to hear what he had to say. So, I'm not a freak for calling you Naru-chan while I nursed you and made love to you. No, Naruto watched as relief figuratively washed over his mother's face. In fact, what we did was rather tame in terms of incestuous fantasies. And let me tell you this. I enjoyed our roleplay every bit as much as you did. You have no idea how long I've been aching for a chance to drink from your tits again. Kushina blushed shyly, mainly because of how erotic their lovemaking had been. She would often recall memories of him as a baby. Perhaps this was the fantasy her subconscious had brewed for her. Of course, now that she was thinking straight, she was reminded of the time she caught Naruto having with her best friend. Makoto had played the role of her feeding Naruto, and she got off on that so hard that she almost blacked out. It made no sense for her to have forgotten such a significant moment. Now that she thought about it, she shouldn't have forgotten about the naughty things she's been doing behind Minato's back, not to mention what she's done when he's in the same room. While watching that movie, she and her son were playing with one another under the blanket, while her husband was laying on the sofa completely oblivious. Then, That time in the kitchen when she snuck under the counter and gave Naruto a blowjob, while her husband once again had no idea that his wife was cheating on him right under his nose. Then again, this lapse of judgment could just be another side effect of the pills she had taken. We will always be mother and son, continued Naruto in a more serious tone. You're the same person who brought me into this world. It's that very person I fell in love with. You are still my mother when we have. How would you feel if I called you by your name instead of Kaheim? A shudder ran through her as she scrunched up her face. Never call me by my name. It would sound wrong coming from you. Exactly, replied the whiskered adult. We aren't civilians, and we don't share their moral compass. I think it's perfectly natural for you to call me Naru-chan when you feed me. In fact, I urge you to open up to me about all your fantasies and I'll be honored to act them out with you. Not only will this strengthen our bond as mother and son, but it'll also do wonders for our relationship. This was just the push Minato's wife needed. Having constant with her son helped resurrect the red-hot habanero, a part of her that hasn't seen the light of day in decades. However, her true self being held in captivity for long was bound to affect her psyche in more ways than one. An example of this was not knowing where to draw the lines. But as her son had explained to her, they weren't civilians, the sky's the limit for them. Taking his hand in hers, she gently pecked his lips. Thank you for that, Sochikoi. You've eased a fair share of my concerns and I promise to share my fantasies as they come to mind. But I have to ask. You said that what we did was rather tame. What exactly classifies as wild for you, then? She had seen Naruto and Makoto role-playing as teacher and student, as well as mother and son. What could possibly top such forbidden fantasies? A devilish smirk curled to Naruto's lips as he leaned into his mother's ear. Allow me to educate you, Kaheim. Blood started dripping from Kushina's nose from the sort of nasty, kinky fantasies her son was revealing to her. The first one consisted of him binding her with chains. Her eyes widened as he went on to explain that he would be whipping her until he left marks. He would then go on in her, refusing to let her out for the next 24 hours. Her breathing became labored, her huge tits rising and falling from imagining him doing such naughty things to her. The fact he was telling her all of this with a straight face told her that this wasn't even close to the sort of things he truly wanted to do with her. She didn't even hear past the next fantasy as it was so dark that a miniature orgasm rippled out of her. What sort of things was he into? For the next 20 minutes, Naruto animatedly revealed to his mother the many, many ways in which he planned to her. Some endearing, others disturbing, and it was too much for the poor married woman to handle. This just reminded her that her husband was poles apart from their son. Naruto was the dominating force in their relationship, but he never held that over her head. One thing she loved about him was that he would always jump through hoops to implement any suggestions she would have to make their lovemaking even better. Not only did they each other, they also made love. It was a perfect balance. Okay, announced Naruto as his adorable mom started yawning. How about you drink some tea and rest for a few hours? Nodding tiredly, the MILF sipped on her tea and reveled in its sweet taste. Her son had told her that she would feel drowsy after taking those feeding pills, but she didn't think the side effects could come in so many forms and could be so severe. Then again, this might also have to do with her lack of sleep these past 3 weeks. She rarely got time to take a breather since all her time has been spent in the bedroom with her son. Thanks to him, she got to have a lifetime's worth of in just a span of 3 weeks. The blonde mother-lover smiled as his mother drifted off to sleep. Laying down beside her, he pulled her into his arms and ran his hands through her luscious red hair. I love you, Kaheim, whispered the blonde as he pecked his mother's lips. Love you, Sochikoi, mumbled Kushina in her sleep, completely missing the heartfelt gaze her son was directing at her. Even in her sleep she was proclaiming her love for him. She was truly meant to be with him. Minato Namikaze's place on this earth was just to help create his wife's future lover. Speaking of his cuckold father, a barrage of memories suddenly filled his brain. He was now aware of the changes going on with the older blonde in the Anbu headquarters. His lips curled into a dark smirk as he took 2 handfuls of his mother's big, fat, "She is mine, san. You will never get her back. XXX. Her legs went on for miles as any sane man would stop what he's doing to gaze at them. Her thick, MILF thighs were accentuated by the leather pants she decided to go with on this fine evening. Tap, tap, tap went her high heels with each step she took. Gorgeous, luscious black tresses hovered beautifully, occasionally flapping against the creamy skin of her perfect face. Her onyx eyes gleamed with delight as she took that final step down the stairs. Fugaku watched in awe as his wife came into view. Every time she would throw on a new attire, it would mesmerize him. How he was able to score her in the first place was beyond him. Today she was wearing a pink frilly shirt, but like always he was captivated with how perfectly her massive tits were riding together. As she sashayed towards him, her girls jiggled with a purpose and he couldn't find a reason to disagree with them. In his opinion, those puppies were begging to be freed from their prison. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he lowered his gaze, only for blood to trickle from his nostrils. His wife was donning black leather pants and they were so tight that he found himself wondering how exactly she was able to put them on in the first place. Thankfully the thick fabric prevented him from making out whether she was wearing a tiny thong or a thick pair of panties. Since he was no longer allowed to watch his wife and Naruto have, he was constantly horny thinking about the ways the two were ing behind his back. You look beautiful, Makoto, said the cuckolded husband fondly. Naruto-sama will love seeing you in that outfit. Thank you, Fugaku, chirruped the MILF with a heartwarming smile. What do you think of my hair? Sweet Kami, that's a hot woman. Makoto squealed girlishly as she ran to her lover, who had just arrived at the compound. Fugaku just chuckled. Good evening, Naruto-sama. Good evening, Fugaku-san, said Naruto kindly before turning his attention back to his best friend's mother. You look beautiful as always, Miko Haim. I think the curls are a great touch by the way. Since his mother needed at least 8 hours of sleep, Naruto decided to spend time with the other love of his life. He had left a clone to cuddle with the redhead just in case she woke up. Makoto dearly wanted him to have an evening date with her because she's only been seeing him at night for the past 3 weeks. Of course, the blonde agreed, since he could never deny his black-haired goddess. Makoto grinned with a cute reddish hue coloring her cheeks. She had spent a good hour trying to curl the bottom tips of her hair, but she was pleased with the honest compliments. Ah, thank you, cooed the elated Blacket. Shall we be off? You know the drill, voiced Naruto sternly. Let me get a good look at you first. Sasuke's mother giggled as her lover spanked her gorgeous bubble butt, causing ripples to run through her doughy cheeks. Naughty Naru Koi. Fugaku admired the hell out of his master for being so genuinely affectionate towards his wife. To be so dominant yet so passionate was an honorable trait. The adulterous couple were now engaged in a hot, passionate kiss. Their tongues were infused with chakra, which he could tell by activating his Sharingan. Next thing he knew, Naruto began massaging Makoto's. The groping was done through her leather pants, but the cuckold husband was trying his best to imagine his wife without them. Suddenly, he was blessed with the mental image of his wife's butt cheeks sinking into the blonde's palms. His breath was coming in short bursts as his wife took charge and started giving his master a lap dance. Of course, this was to be expected since everyone in the Uchiha compound was well aware that Naruto loved watching Makoto shake that for him. Up and down, left and right, there was magic in the woman's childbearing hips as she gyrated them with such precision that it was like the blonde was the sun and she was a planet elliptically orbiting him. Makoto's erotic sighs could be heard echoing through the living room as her lover nibbled on the creamy skin of her neck. Like a professional ballerina, she arched her back whilst sensually sliding her from his lap up to his chest. The change in position caused the fabric of her leather pants to stretch out, presenting him with a front row seat to one of the most glorious asses on the face of this earth. Both her massive tits were in his possession as he started mauling them through her shirt. Sweet nectar started gathering at the peachy gates of her cunt as she kept revolving her hips to imaginary music. Fugaku's tiny stirred until it was rock hard. What he wouldn't do to have one last opportunity to watch his wife get the shithead out of her by his master. This was especially difficult for him because Naruto had nailed Makoto dozens of times on that very sofa. It took all his strength to snap back to reality, but it was just in time as the couple were now back on their feet. The woman was sporting a full-body flush, her lover was sporting a foxy grin, while her husband was sporting a boner. "You have permission to relieve yourself, Fugaku-san," announced Naruto, having cited the man's discomfort. "We're leaving. Thank you, have a good time, Makoto, Naruto-sama," exclaimed the Uchiha clan head and wasted no time in making a beeline for his bedroom. Makoto giggled at the blur that was her cuckold husband. It was clear as day he had left to jack off to one of the many videos of her and Naruto having. Turning her attention to her amused lover, she pecked his lips and intertwined their fingers. The couple proceeded to exit the compound as they couldn't wait to enjoy what they planned to be a romantic evening date. XXX. His breathing was labored, his heart racing 1,000,000 miles per second. His onyx orbs were burning fire red as he channeled chakra to his eyes and called upon his legendary dojutsu. His girlfriend's big, deliciously juicy was ballooned out on his master's thighs. She was limp against him out of complete and utter submission. The two symmetrical spheres of her bottom were vibrating with considerable force, but only because a terrifyingly huge was being shoved up her tight little. It took 5 excruciatingly long minutes, all 5 minutes consisting of her whimpers, but now the massive head was finally spearing through her labia lips. Tears were flowing down her beautiful features from getting the vaginal stretching of a lifetime. Like most female members of her clan, she had black eyes, long flowing black hair and a pale complexion. However, what stood out between her and the majority was the fact she had a big, fattened huge tits. She was hailed as a supermodel by hundreds of Konoha men, but she had nothing on the most gorgeous female Uchiha to ever exist, Makoto Uchiha. Izumi was openly crying now, and a pang of guilt rushed through her boyfriend. "Please, go easy on her, Naruto. Don't worry, Itachi," said Naruto while taking 2 handfuls of the man's girlfriend's scrumptious bottom. "This pain will be temporary for Izumi-chan." Turning his attention back to his new lover, he gently pecked her lips. "Spread your cheeks and drop your hips further. Let's loosen up that tight of yours." A normal man would have drowned in shame to hear his girlfriend shrieking like a harpy from getting split wide open by another man's. However, as a genetically programmed submissive Uchiha male, the sight of his girlfriend being claimed by his master was bringing him more pleasure than he ever thought possible. Staring down at his lap, he was taken back by the sight of his throbbing. "Never has his been this hard. Naruto-sama." Izumi began gushing juice by the gallon and it was a sight to behold. What was once a noble lady hailing from an elite class clan had now transformed into a wanton whose expression read, "I'm being ed stupid." Her childbearing hips were thrusting wildly, rocking against her new lover's lap. Her black eyes were rolling to the back of her head, but she kept screaming at the top of her lungs. She was no longer his. She belonged to her husband's master now. Itachi awoke with a thunderous gasp and immediately went about catching his breath. It was late afternoon when he had closed his eyes to take a small nap. He hadn't anticipated that this nap would turn into the most graphic dream of his entire life. Black orbs flickered as he palmed his forehead and wiped the sweat off his skin. His precious girlfriend's face looked so wanton and contorted in that dream. The facial expressions reminded him of how his mother looked while getting ed by Naruto. "Ni-san." Fugaku's eldest son turned his head to see his little brother staring down at him with concern. Taking a sigh, he sat upright and leaned against his headboard. "Are you all right?" asked Sasuke as he sat down on the edge of his brother's mattress. "Your door was open, and you were mumbling in your sleep." For a couple of minutes, the bedroom was met with silence. Ultimately, Itachi clenched his blanket in his balled fists. I had a dream, whispered the Anbu. I don't know what to make of it. Were you thinking about Izumi Ne-san laying with another man? Queried Sasuke and smirked when his brother looked up at him in shock. I guess I hit a nail in the coffin with that. How do you know? Asked Itachi, genuinely confused. I know because I've been having similar dreams. Not about Izumi Ne-san, but about a girl in my dreams that I'm married to, began Sasuke, his voice soft and meek. Every night I dream about her with the dobi. Is he-ing her in your dreams? Hi, said Fugaku's youngest without skipping a beat. These dreams started shortly after I saw Kaa-san and the dobi going at it. I just can't get them out of my mind. A sigh escaped Itachi's lips as he nodded along. Naruto was having with Izumi-chan in my dream. I was sitting in a chair masturbating while watching her get stretched out by him. The two brothers shared a glance and shook their heads. It became clear to Itachi from this dream that he could never experience true pleasure unless he hands over his girlfriend to a superior male like Naruto. Sasuke had already arrived at that conclusion a few weeks ago. What do we do? Whispered Sasuke with a frown marring his face. We can't let Kaa-san know about this. She's still not okay with sharing the dobi with Kushina Oba-san. You're right, came the monotone response from his brother. As much as I want Naruto to Izumi-chan, I refuse to bring Kaa-san any more pain. It'll hurt her more that you're keeping this from her. The duo almost broke their necks as they snapped their heads in the direction of the door. Sasuke cursed himself for forgetting that he had left his brother's door open. Their hearts hammered hard into their chests to see their father closing the door behind him and making his way towards them. They thanked the heavens that their mother hadn't overheard them. Makoto may be a sweet angel, but everyone in Konoha knew she was the Shinigami when angered. Fugaku had just finished masturbating to a tape starring his wife and her lover. Normally, he would light up a few candles, put on some music and turn off the lights. Watching the couple have was an otherworldly experience for him. Unfortunately, he got so horny from the show the two had put on earlier that he busted a nut in record time. It was on his way to the kitchen that he overheard his children, and the topic of conversation prevented him from keeping quiet. "To-san, save it," interrupted Fugaku in an all-business tone. "I went into detail of our situation when you both saw Naruto-sama having your mother. Not a single Uchiha exists in our clan who can become your master because no one is dominant enough. I was lucky that Naruto-sama cuckolded me. Not only is he a wonderful master, but he takes excellent care of Makoto." Jiraiya was the only outsider aside from Naruto who knew of the Uchiha clan's most guarded secret. However, that was because Naruto had requested Fugaku's permission to educate his teacher. Fugaku wasn't happy about it, but agreed since he wanted to be dutiful to his master. Ultimately, the Toad Sage was sworn into secrecy to keep this tight-lipped or else face execution for spilling clan secrets. Anger coursed through Itachi for being reminded that his father was the luckiest male Uchiha on the planet. Cuckolds were humiliated on a daily basis by their master. It was once in a blue moon that Naruto exerted his authority over Fugaku. Itachi was told that cuckolds were treated like trash, but that wasn't the way his father got treated. Cuckolds were often forced to their masters. Such a thing would never happen in his father's case since Naruto was strictly hetero. On top of that, Fugaku was never ridiculed for his submissive male Uchiha genes. Instead, he was granted permission to watch his wife and her lover have for 5 years. All in all, the blonde was the perfect master for any male Uchiha. Itachi knew there was no way he could find someone like that to take ownership of his girlfriend. Naruto was the only person who he would accept as his master. Unfortunately, he just couldn't see the man betraying Kushina and Makoto. Sasuke unknowingly thought along the same lines as his brother. Anyway, continued Fugaku, noting the angered looks. You both are right about not bringing this up to Makoto's attention. She's very vulnerable right now and will be livid with the prospect of sharing Naruto-sama with yet another woman. That being said, Your mother is a very understanding woman and she will never willingly deny you the chance of getting a master like Naruto-sama. Pausing here, he stared at his sons, both of whom were gaping like a pair of fish. I am hopeful that Naruto-sama will agree to become your master as well. I'll talk to him about this soon. Leave everything to me. Thud thud went Itachi's racing heart as his Sharingan sprang to life. Are you serious, Tu-san? Do you really think Naruto will agree? A light flush crept up to Sasuke's cheeks from the thought of his future wife getting stuffed with the Dobi's monster. He had to resist the urge to rush to the bathroom and start jacking off. Like I said, Naruto-sama is a wonderful master. I am sure he will agree to claim your girlfriend as his. Just remember to hurry up and marry her, Sochi. Fugaku's voice grew serious here. You know Naruto-sama is only attracted to married women and mothers. Itachi wanted to slap himself silly for forgetting such a crucial thing. It was no secret that Naruto wasn't interested in single women or girls of his generation. Now the idea of tying the knot with Izumi didn't seem like such a bad idea. He loved her and could see himself marrying her in the summer. If all goes well like his father said, he could soon start his new life as a cuckold husband. I don't even have a girlfriend yet, muttered Sasuke depressingly. Why would, Naruto? It was hard not saying, the Dobi, but the situation warranted a name change, for now at least. His father and brother both looked a little shocked but were quick to regain their composure. Why would he? Shish, said Fugaku, placing a hand on his youngest son's shoulder. That's not an issue. We can find you a girl. You do have a bunch of marriage proposals as well, added Itachi while playfully poking his brother's forehead. Keep your head high, foolish little brother. A smile curled to Sasuke's lips. I guess you're right. Fugaku ruffled up his son's hair. Let's whip up some lunch and continue this talk in the dining hall, said the clan head warmly. Your mother will be back from her date with Naruto-sama in a couple of hours, that is if they don't decide to take a detour to have. In any case, this should be enough time for me to explain how I plan to present my case to Naruto-sama. Itachi and Sasuke jumped out of bed like rockets and dragged their chuckling father into the kitchen. It was a fine evening in the Uchiha compound. XXX. A shiver ran down Makoto's spine as she stared blankly at the sky. Why do I feel like killing Fugaku right now? The married woman was interrupted from her thoughts as her lover ruffled up her hair. She shook her head as her way of silently waving off his concern. There was an uncomfortable silence, but she had no intention of breaking it because there was a lot on her mind. After all, it was during this walk that she was informed that he got his mother to feed him today. 2 weeks ago, he told her that he took Kushina's anal virginity. That revelation came to her as a shock because it took her 5 years to gather the courage to offer him her. Was it her fault for acting hesitant? It was painful getting her stretched out by him the first time they had. And her was button tiny, so it wasn't terrible of her not wanting to get sodomized sooner than later. She knew Kushina had spied on her and Naruto having, meaning the woman had seen her get asked. Having grown up with the redhead, she knew the woman must have hatched that conniving plan to convince Naruto that she's the better lay. But, feeding, a part of her was proud of Kushina for being so viciously competitive, but the greater part of her was infuriated with her competition. She couldn't believe how jealous she was getting of the former pretty much a virgin housewife. What now? Did Naruto find his mother's tighter than hers? Asking herself that question made her mind wander to the source of her jealousy. How far did the redhead plan to take this? If she was going so fast now, what will she bring to his doorstep in the future? How many years have we been together, Miko Haim? Fugaku's wife was yanked from her internal debate as she stared up at her lover. He repeated his question to her and she chewed on her bottom lip. 5 years. And where exactly in the elemental nations haven't we traveled? Asked Naruto with his cerulean blue orbs peering into his lover's own. None. We have been everywhere, replied Makoto with her lips curling into a cute little smile. That was one of the most exciting parts of their relationship. Back when she was a kunoichi, she got to travel to various parts of the globe. However, she would get sent to new places for missions, meaning she never got to experience the joy of traveling and enjoying different cultures. But on their second-year anniversary, her husband's master took her to Wave Country and its neighboring towns. Wave Country was and still is one of her favorites. After all, her lover was held in the highest of regards there and had a statue built in his name in the town square. From that point on, she got to check off every single nation from her list and see for herself exactly how different each town and village was culture-wise. Different dialects, skin color, hair color. Some natives talked faster than others, some refused to eat meat. The world was such a big place. Relief washed over her from recalling their greatest hits. Just thinking about it was making her want to go on another trip with him. How many hotel rooms have we in? Hundreds, murmured the lady, her cheeks coloring as she puffed them out like a squirrel. Do you love me? Answering that question felt like a natural reflex. More than life itself. And I love you, Miko Haim, whispered Naruto as he pecked his godmother on the forehead. I know how difficult this is for you, which is why I keep reminding you every day that it doesn't matter what Haim and I do in the bedroom. I can her and theer her all day long, but that won't have any effect on how I feel about you. We promised never to keep secrets from one another, and that's why I share everything with you, even though I know some of it may hurt you. This is my way of reassuring you that I'll never neglect you. I hope one day you'll believe me. I do believe you, Narukoi, said Makoto seriously, her heart pounding hard into her chest. Sharing him was very difficult due to the constant fear of getting replaced by his mother. Every new thing he would do with Kushina would amplify her fears. Thankfully, he would always help her through her concerns, like he had done for her just now. This back and forth would then remind her once again why she even agreed to let him fornicate with his mother as well. It took all her strength and then some to fight the urge to kiss him right here in the middle of the street. Making out with him sounded heavenly, but unfortunately this wasn't the place to do it. That's because the two were out in the Uchiha district and no one outside of her family knew that she was cheating on her husband. She hoped that there would come a time when she could openly display her love for Naruto and not care for a stupid bitch gossiping about it to the wrong people. This was why she was so eager to travel with him again. Oh, look, there's Amy-chan. Plump, kissable lips curled into a childish grin as the MILF saw an adorable little girl running towards her and her lover. Amy Uchiha was an excitable munchkin who loved everything blue. Sapphire gems, blue flowers such as irises, dresses that are blue, she simply couldn't get enough of the color. Quicker than the blink of an eye, the little one was on the floor, laughing melodically as Naruto performed the deadly tickle no jutsu on her. NN Naruto ni, cried Amy. Aha aha. Makoto gazed lovingly at the man she was cheating on her husband with. Several Uchiha clansmen nearby paid fond glances at the duo before going about their merry way. Due to him being her godson, Naruto had always been treated kindly by the Uchiha clan. However, their kindness evolved to worship over the years as he helped them financially. You see, Naruto's a trillionaire. His first business venture was investing in Wave Country's seaport, and he was able to earn back 2,000 times the amount in just 3 short years. From there, he decided to purchase 1,000 acres of land to build a 7-star resort near the fire capital. It was while drilling into the ground that his shadow clones realized that the land was littered with diamonds. Long story short, 99% of the world's jewelry stores import their diamonds from Naruto. The connections he had with royal figures across the globe coupled with his devil's luck has helped him become the only trillionaire in the elemental nations. However, he never hesitates to help those in need. The orphanage was funded by him, and even the mortgages on shops, apartments and houses have been paid off by him. Naruto had done this for everyone all across Konoha. He even took care of the entire village's utility bills. It was his belief that his fellow villagers should live freely. Extra spending money meant more people will spend on material goods, thus attracting merchants. Also, more money means fewer late nights at work, thus bringing families closer together. Since his father opposed this belief and wanted to take no part in it, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Of course, there were conditions. The applicant must be a permanent resident of Konoha and must have resided in the village for the past decade. A citizen born in Konoha will have to show proof that she has resided in the village for the past 2 years. There were also strict rules and regulations set for rent payers, mortgage payers, business owners. Taking advantage of such a system was relatively easy, which was why Naruto decided to implement laws to prevent it from happening. So while the adults held the blonde in high regards, no one adored him more than kids. Amy Uchiha was so taken with Naruto because of his cerulean blue eyes. Since blue was her favorite color, and she had never seen a person with blue eyes before, Naruto instantly became her favorite person. This breathtakingly beautiful sight before her was the reason why she wanted to bear her son's best friend's child. It was only due to Naruto making a cuck out of her husband that Fugaku broke through his emotionless shell. Being a mother wouldn't have proved such a daunting task had her husband been more attentive back then. She knew her pregnancy this time around would be a piece of cake. Naruto would be there for her every step of the way and would make an excellent father. Onyx orbs softened as Amy waved her little hand at her. "Hey, Amy-chan," whispered the former Kunoichi as she approached the duo. "How are you?" "I'm good, Makoto ne," chirruped the bubbly girl. "Will you come to the shop today?" By shop, Amy meant K&M Sweets, a dessert shop in the Uchiha district. Namika, the girl's mother, was the owner of the shop, and it was quite the popular spot. The adulterous couple were frequent customers, mostly since Sasuke's mother had a sweet tooth. From day one, Amy had referred to Naruto and Makoto as boyfriend and girlfriend, but neither of them bothered to correct her. While she wasn't ashamed to be Fugaku's wife, Makoto loved it when people referred to her as Naruto's girlfriend. "We will," assured the Uchiha matriarch. "By the way, where's your mother?" Her eyes narrowed as she placed her hands on her hips. "Don't tell me you're out skipping around with no parental supervision." Amy giggled nervously as she scratched the back of her head, a habit she had picked up from Naruto. Today was busy at the shop, so her mother had no idea that she had left. She was meaning to head back 5 minutes ago, but got distracted by a cornflower. Who could blame her? The flower was blue and pretty. Makoto had to fight back a squeal at the adorable sight. "Let's get you back to your mother, sweetie. She must be worried sick about you." Naruto was silent as he watched Makoto carry Amy in her arms. The woman had an angelic glow to her while smothering the little girl with her love, and it was making him fall in love with her all over again. It was cheesy, but he could have sworn he saw a halo above Fugaku's wife's head. The way her eyes would light up to see newborns was proof that she was ready to be a mother again. Besides, they've talked about having children dozens of times over the course of their relationship. It was unfair and heartless of him to needlessly prolong the inevitable. He could see that now. His desire to his mother and make a cuck out of his father had distracted him from keeping his word to her. But that was then, and this is now. It's time to fulfill that promise. Now I want to be a florist. That's great, Amy-chan. Despite the mental debate he was having with himself, Naruto was absently picking up on a few things here and there from the conversation the two were having. Amy had always wanted to become a doctor, but from what he had just heard, her choice profession had changed overnight. Then again, she's still a child, so she has a lot of time to decide what she wants to be when she grows up. She could end up running her mother's dessert shop for all they know. "That does sound fun," said Naruto while patting the girl on the head. "You should always do what you're most passionate about." Amy nodded excitedly at her surrogate older brother. She felt she was most passionate about flowers, so that's why she wanted to become a florist when she grows up. The trio talked all the way to the shop, where the little girl got a scolding from her mother for running off without telling her. Namika thanked the duo for returning, the blue troublemaker, back to her, earning a laugh from Naruto and Makoto, and an adorable pout from her daughter. Since Makoto was the Uchiha matriarch, she was royalty and was treated as such by her clansmen. It was 11 years ago that she walked into K&M Sweets for the first time. The shop had opened its doors for the first time back then, so she was extremely nervous when the woman graced her with her presence. Obviously, that wasn't the case now since the two women had become friends over time. Naruto was also dear to her heart. It was due to his financial contributions that she was given a chance to spend less hours at the shop so she could spend more time with her darling daughter. The adulterous couple spent the next 40 minutes enjoying pastries and a chocolate milkshake. Amy chatted animatedly with them, showing them both various flowers she found today while she was out and about. Unfortunately, customers kept popping up so Namika couldn't be a part of their conversation. For another 10 minutes or so, Naruto and Makoto sat in silence, which was frequently broken since patrons wanted to greet their matriarch and the man who helped them attain financial freedom. It was only when Amy excused herself that Naruto leaned into his lover's ear. Spiral flames. Her fork fell to her plate as she choked on the piece of pastry she was chewing on. She tried blinking away the water welling in her onyx orbs, but she could no longer fight the tears. Time stood still for her as she searched her lover for deceit, but could find none. She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. Her heart hammered a loud, frantic heartbeat as she shook in her seat like she was at the mercy of an unsuspecting earthquake. No one other than her would be able to decipher the meaning behind those two words he had spoken. That was mainly because this was a code phrase that meant, "Let's have a baby." They say, "I love you," are the only three words that can be so light yet be so heavy. That claim wasn't true in this particular test case, for it took only 2 words to bring her world to a screeching halt. 4 years have been spent praying to Kami-sama for her lover to give her a sign that he was ready to take the next step in their relationship, and he had just given her that sign. Without warning, Naruto grabbed his lover's hand and the two vanished via shunshin. Namika collected the money from the couple's table with her eyebrows crinkling in confusion. Why'd those two leave so soon? They usually stay for at least an hour to talk with Amy-chan. I hope everything is all right. Speaking of Amy, the munchkin had fallen asleep behind the counter while reading a book about flowers. Otherwise, she would have started complaining about the disappearance of her beloved Nei-chan and Ni-chan. XXX. A pair of sweaty arms were wrapped around the muscular frame of the man she was cheating on her husband with. The thickness of his golden locks was in her grasp as she was holding on to him for dear life. Her massive tits were shaded a bright red from getting groped by him. Although their relationship was full of fluffy romance, hardcore suited them best. That was because the demonic mating allowed them both to express their feelings in ways that gentle lovemaking just couldn't do. But this lovemaking is epic making, and it can turn the bitchiest of feminists into men lovers. She had long since forgotten her identity, where she was, or who she was. She stared deeply into his eyes, fixated, consumed by the sheer passion bubbling in his cerulean blue orbs. In response, she looked at him with a radiance of affection and almost a halo of spirituality around her. He was uniting all of her and she was uniting all of him. Their souls were meeting, tangling and coming together. They moved, writhed, and touched each other in ways that transcended the spoken word. The connection between them slowly evolved into an essence of total and unbelievable UAL and erotic contact. Tantric energy was being channeled from their genitals through their entire bodies until the pleasure lifted them both up and away from the physical world. A spiritual oneness was felt among them as the love they had for each other filled all space and time for them. Her mashed against his pubic hair as she leaned forward. Ripples ran through her gorgeous bubble butt from coming in contact with the palm of his hand. The angle of his thrusts changed slightly as his monster explored her extra small. Despite having stretched that out, it would always manage to revert back to its virgin tightness, not that he was complaining. She chewed on her bottom lip, sobbing in pleasure as her son's best friend plunged steeply in and out of her anus. They've been having for the past 3 hours now, and this was an anal interlude. Grinding her hips, she expertly tightened her anal muscles around his monster. This allowed her to feel every twitch, throb, and millimeter of movement as she held him in the tightest hole of her body. She soon felt his giant shaft flex within her, and an intense combination of pleasure, pain and lust rippled through her, contorting her face to match the emotions she was going through. Boring through the discomfort of getting rectally examined by 14.5 inches of steel, she started dancing on his lap. This was her attempt to tease him, taunt him, drive him crazy so he would fill her to the brim with thick jism. She bounced up and down on his ungodly large with the skills she knew she possessed, the skills she had acquired over the course of 5 years, the skills that made him give up being prostitutes. She could see it in his eyes that she was pleasuring him better than his mother. Unlike Kushina, who was still a novice, she had spent years educating herself on what Naruto liked in bed, such as knowing how to massage his using only her in. 40 minutes into this and she got her wish. The imaginary bodyguard monitoring her was ripped to shreds as ropes upon ropes of potent semen went rocketing through the blonde's urethra and went spearing through his best friend's mother's anal cavity. Vibrations ran through her walls as they contracted around him, trying to squeeze the life out of him. While this went down, gallons of juice gushed from the depths of her cunt, drenching his lap and the soft blanket below them. Sasuke's mother was only given 60 seconds to ride the high of her orgasm, so she made every second count. But that was easier said than done since her lover was stroking her all over with his fingers. He skimmed his fingertips lightly over her shoulders, down her back, then gripped her firmly at her waist, pulling her tight against him. She shuddered her against him as his fingers slipped into the bridge between her butt cheeks. And no, it didn't help that he was nipping the most sensitive part of her neck. Panting heavily, she tried shooing away the millions of light particles assaulting her field of vision. The gentle gusts of wind provided a soothing feel to her shimmering tits as she immersed herself in the sounds of nature. The adulterous couple were currently making love on the outskirts of the Uchiha district. This was their personal getaway spot when they felt the need to have outdoors. A lake was nearby, which they often used to clean themselves up with. Across the river was a beautiful cabin that Naruto had constructed for overnight mating sessions. This spot was also very romantic because this was the perfect area to catch the sunset and sunrise, not to mention see sparkling stars in the night. Best of all, this area was locked down via Fuinjutsu and Genjutsu, so only Naruto and Makoto were aware of it. So lost in her trip down memory lane, Sasuke's mother hadn't realized until the very last minute that her was being stretched by her lover's monster. Once again, the two lost one another as their lovemaking transcended the physical sensation of his oversized shaft hitting her square in the cervix. Every gentle stroke he made inside her was a dream come true. Every sigh, every whisper, every touch, all of it seemed to draw them towards a light that pulsed in her heart. They kissed with their eyes, like they kissed with their mouths, like they kissed between their legs. Their hips met in the fondest of ways as they became aware of their fingers, arms, touching, the way their bodies were melting into one another. They were totally one in that moment, their bodies, hearts, and minds intertwined and totally in tune with one another. So beautiful was the art of conception that she wanted to cry to the heavens and thank Kami-sama for blessing her with the love of her life. Thick, matronly thighs wrapped around him, but it was her breathless wails that told him that he had possessed her utterly. She was nearing the verge of yet another orgasm. Sadly for her, he had no intention of letting her go off that easy. His nostrils were filled with her scent, both the sweet scent of pheromones from her skin and the sweet honey from between her legs. It was mesmerizing to gaze at his monstrous shaft sliding in and out between the petals of her labia. Their pubic hairs were all alight with sparkling juice that she was so generous to shower them both with. Unlike Minato, who was a tiny EDUAL disappointment, Naruto could actually bring women to leg-shaking orgasms in the missionary position. First, a myriad of emotions rose through her toes and shot through her feet. With each slight movement, he thrilled her and sent shockwaves through her loins. She raised her legs, then stuck them into the air so she could take him deeper into her. Warmth radiated out from where they were linked and made her feel lightheaded for the umpteenth time. It was then the sensual energy pushed through her stomach and went straight to her massive tits, which were doing their own little dance as each thrust made her puppies jiggle. It was then a light breeze seemed to come up like a breath that gives life. The intensity strummed her like a musical instrument, and every time she felt she could take no more, he pounded into her like an ocean wave, spilling and pouring over her soul in warm, swirling currents. His name meant maelstrom, and that's just the effect he was making her experience. Warm and pure like air touched, their eyes met, and they came together like honey pouring all over their bodies, warm honey flowing over them and filling their hearts and tummies. Tears started streaking down Makoto's face as she orgasmed with all her might. Squirting so much in so little time was discomforting, but it was a discomfort no woman would complain about. Her body was racked with more emotion than she could bear because her wildest dreams were coming true. The man she was cheating on, her husband, was pounding into her as each throb traveled from the base of his monster up through her, hitting right in her ecstatic womb. A tsunami of jism was being deposited inside her, and her inner walls were more than happy to guide them to where they needed to go. Chakra was channeled to her nervous system, preventing her from blacking out. Normally, she wouldn't have minded being rendered unconscious because it was a joy to take a small nap after hours of non-stop. This time was different. This time she needed to stay vigilant and alert. She let out a frail cry as her son's best friend pulled out of her tight cunt. Her little folds were quick to come together since there was no more monster keeping them stretched apart. She wasted no time to elevate her hips, not wanting her lover's jism to leak unnecessarily. After all, for the first time, there was no birth control jutsu being used to neutralize the effects of his potent sperm. A devoted gaze was directed at him through her Sharingan-activated eyes. Gathering the courage, she broke the 4-hour-long silence by saying the 7 words she's been dying to say to him for the past 4 years. "You're going to be a daddy, Narukoi. XXX. Fugaku Uchiha knew this day would come, but he hadn't expected it to be today. It confused him when his wife came in strutting through the door like the goddess she was. The sun had been rather mean today with its intense rays, but that brilliant illumination paled in comparison to the afterglow gracing Makoto's face. He knew she just recently got ed by her lover. Then again, he was bound to pick up on that with how long he's been her cuckold husband. What confused him was that every minute or so she would run a hand along her stomach. His confusion morphed into concern. Did she get injured? Was she experiencing a stomachache? His eyebrows crinkled in concentration, but there were no signs of her in any sort of discomfort. So why was she repeatedly rubbing her tummy? Tearing his gaze off his wife, he saw his master with a bunch of bags in hand. All the bags had the K&M Sweets insignia, so he knew the two had gone on a date there. He then saw the blonde motioning for him to take the bags from him, which he did without a second's notice. "These are for you, Fugaku-san." Fugaku bowed his head. "Thank you, Naruto-sama." "Narukoi," piped in Makoto. "Those are for my sons as well." She glanced over at her husband. "Do you mind calling them Fugaku?" "Not at all," voiced Fugaku with the slightest hint of hesitation. "Is this for a special occasion?" Naruto chuckled to see the mischievous smile curling to his godmother's lips. "You want to tell him, Miko Heim?" "Sure," twittered the MILF. "To answer your question, Fugaku, yes, this is for a special occasion. After all, our sons will soon be expecting a little brother or sister." The adulterous couple shared a brief kiss before leaning into one another. Their latest session left them both overwhelmed, and they planned to bask in the euphoria all through tonight. They say difficult roads lead to beautiful destinations, and this destination was truly beautiful. Makoto felt like the luckiest woman on the planet as she leaned into her lover's arm. She didn't mind that he was 4 years late in fulfilling his promise to her because there's no time like the present. Meanwhile, the bags almost fell to the ground as the strength left the Uchiha clan head's body. His knees buckled, his eyes widening to the size of dinner plates. The air was pushed out of his lungs, leaving him gasping for breath. His submissive male Uchiha genes started acting up as unfathomable joy started cruising the arteries leading to his heart. It was his ultimate cuckold fantasy to see his master breeding his wife. Tears welled in his eyes as Makoto got scooped into Naruto's arms. Unfortunately, with his happiness came a bottomless sadness. What position was used for the conception? Where did they have? It's been a dream of his to witness the conception in person so he could witness the magic up close. Sadly, that dream will never come true. He was yanked from his depressing thoughts as his master placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, Fugaku-san," said the blonde. "You'll get the tape in a few days." Fugaku dropped to his knees and bowed his head, just about ready to kiss his master's feet. The living room was now full of the sounds of him thanking Naruto from the bottom of his heart. Naruto chuckled as he pulled the man up, while Makoto giggled at her overjoyed husband. The adulterous couple knew what this meant for Fugaku, so they didn't want him to feel left out. After all, Naruto couldn't have bagged Makoto if she hadn't married Fugaku. Besides, the man was a model cuckold and the whiskered Junin enjoyed being his master. After hugging his wife and her lover, Fugaku rushed off to inform his sons that the blonde mother-lover had just impregnated his best friend's mother. Cerulean blue orbs squeezed shut as a feminine hand cupped his small balls. He groaned, arching his back and levitating a few inches off his seat. "Pull your pants back up, Minato." The Hokage did as told, but felt incredibly awkward to see the dull look on his doctor's face. "So," murmured the blonde. "What's the verdict?" Earlier this morning, his world came to a screeching halt when he felt a scorching pain in his crotch. It hurt when he tried to walk, it hurt when he tried to sit down. He couldn't even urinate without feeling like his scrotum was on fire. He had blazed through 9 out of the 10 new Netarare novels Jiraiya had left for him. Unfortunately, he couldn't masturbate due to the pain in his nether region. This break from wanking helped him snap back to reality and realize just how badly he had taken advantage of his poor secretary. The woman was traumatized because he had forced her to read aloud the novels to him. Informing her to take the next few days off, he summoned an Anbu to have her memories of the past week wiped clean. After an hour had passed and he wasn't getting any better, he decided to summon the elemental nation's most renowned medic and his wife's distant relative. Tsunade peered into the hopeful eyes of her leader. When she was called into this temporary office almost 7 hours ago, she was shocked to see a scrawny man with unkempt hair, a messy beard, and such body odor that she could smell him from 5 feet away. At first, she thought Kushina had kicked him out of the house. The hypothesis was plausible when taking into account the redhead's temper. She didn't expect the yellow flash to have busted his epididymis, which is the tube located at the back of the testicles that stores and carries semen. From the symptoms he had listed off, pain in pelvic area, urgent and frequent urination, and low-grade fever, she had a feeling he had epididymitis. This is most commonly caused by U-ally transmitted diseases, but also by non-U-ally transmitted infections like urinary tract infections. While she tried not to pry into people's personal lives, she had a sinking feeling that Minato had contracted something from a woman he was having an affair with. This aligned with her assumption that Kushina had kicked him out of the house. Out of all the possible scenarios, she wasn't expecting for him to confide in her that he's become an over-excessive masturbator. His inflamed epididymis was treated by simply channeling medicinal chakra, but she still needed to take a urine sample. Thanks to the hospital staff she had personally trained, she got the results back within an hour flat. It revealed that he's clear of any U-ally transmitted disease, and further tests ruled out the possibility of a bacterial infection. The 2 major causes of his condition didn't apply to him, but she wasn't Hashirama's granddaughter in name only. It's been 4 hours since then and Minato's already on the fast track to recovery. Your epididymitis is clearing up, said Tsunade in a professional tone. The discomfort in your groin will disappear if you take the medicine I've prescribed to you and have a good night's rest. From tomorrow onward, you won't be in pain if you do decide to masturbate. Just make sure you don't overdo it. His body relaxed as relief washed over him. Thank you. You're welcome, spoke Jiraiya's former classmate nonchalantly. Personally, I hope that you won't keep this to yourself. This obsession will be the end of you if Kushina ever finds out. No, exclaimed Minato, slamming his hands on the table. I have it under control. Her eyes narrowed as she crossed her arms, accentuating her humongous tits. Minato, on my way back from the hospital, I stopped by the Hokage Tower and learned from the staff that the renovations were complete almost a month ago. She paused here with anger bubbling in her voice. You need help. Hiding here forever is cowardly for a man of your stature. You've been neglecting everything just so you can play with yourself. She could also see the piles of documents on the floor, sofa, and table. This could only mean that he's not even signing his paperwork. What if a pregnant kunoichi wants to be crossed off the active roster, but she hasn't received the approval because Minato is too busy stroking his baby? The little respect she had for him was dying out at a considerably fast rate. Jiraiya must have been responsible for turning this dedicated Hokage into the pathetic wanker before her. She took a deep breath, and the inflating effect it had on her enormous tits almost tore her gray kimono-style blouse in half. Unfortunately, she had no proof to back her claims. All she knew was that Minato couldn't keep his hands off himself. She had no idea why. Speaking of the Toad Sage, the man had hightailed it out of the Anbu headquarters when Minato had summoned Tsunade into the office. However, his presence wasn't all that needed since everything transpiring in the office is being recorded and analyzed by Naruto's shadow clones in real time. Why, you're right, whispered Minato as he clenched his fists. I have to get a hold of myself. Tsunade was taken back by the fire in the Hokage's eyes, the will of fire. Not even during his inauguration had she seen him so determined. This was the look of a man about to kick his addiction, and she believed that he could do it. A grin curled to her lips as she nodded her head in contentment. She was about to take her leave when she heard him calling out to her. Wait, you know that I. Save it, Minato, said Tsunade with a chuckle. I've known you since you were a gaki. You can't stand getting a bad rep, and you have severe trust issues. You will never allow me to walk away knowing your secret, despite knowing that I'm bound by doctor-patient confidentiality. A sigh escaped her. So, who are you sending to make me forget whatever happened inside this office? Minato simply flared his chakra and then swung his chair around, refusing to meet the Sanin's eyes, refusing to admit that she was right. The door creaked open and Tsunade found the answer she was looking for in the form of Inoichi Yamanaka. Ripples ran through her big, juicy derriere as she began walking towards the man. If she was going to get the events of today wiped from her mind, she wanted it to happen somewhere other than this stuffy office. Minato glanced around his surroundings, frowning at how far he had fallen. Netarare was like a virus which had infected his mind and made him lose sense of reality. Gritting his teeth, he flared his chakra once more, and this time an Anbu operative appeared in a plume of smoke. Bear, spoke the man whose wife was cheating on him with their son. It's time to relocate to the Hokage Tower. They say the cure for an obsession is finding another one. Instead of throwing himself in novels that feature men getting cuckolded, he planned to throw himself in his duties as Konoha's leader. But as he would soon come to learn, when defeat is inevitable, it's wisest to yield. XXX. Good afternoon, Naruto-sama. Quote. The blonde's nostrils flared as a low growl came up from his throat. It was until I got your phone call. Where is she? She's right here, said the cuckold meekly, gesturing behind him. His heart skipped a beat as his master's gaze was like a dagger to his heart. On cue, a shaky Makoto popped out from behind her fearful husband. She paid her lover a glance, but meeting his dominating blue orbs was a grave mistake. Her plump, kissable lips, which she had slathered with red lipstick, quivered as she ducked her head with embarrassment marching across her features. Her flowing mane of black tresses cascaded down her shoulders, begging to be swept aside so that her creamy neck could be kissed and ed on. The button-up shirt she had on was more like lingerie than something a modest woman would wear outdoors. It fitted snugly around her well-endowed chest and it was undone just enough to show the hardening cleft in between her humongous marshmallows of flesh. The black bra hidden beneath the white exterior was seen easily through her barely a shirt. Naruto's monster stirred in his pants from drinking in the sight of his lover's exposed stomach. The sight of her belly button was making him want to spray her with whipped cream and eat her for days. Her curvaceous figure was only accentuated by the red and black pleated skirt she had on. She tried smoothing it down against her thighs, trying to coax a few millimeters of length, but it was still barely low enough to cover her glorious derriere. It was the perfect tie skirt, the kind that had a ridiculous hemline. The thickness of her matronly thighs was highlighted via her thigh-high black stockings. Her long, slender legs went on for miles. So lost in picturing them wrapped around him, he barely acknowledged that she was donning black high-heel shoes. Long story short, Makoto Uchiha was all dolled up, dressed as a schoolgirl. A very, very schoolgirl. You didn't want to continue the ninja academy because the life of a kunoichi no longer suited you, began Naruto once he regained his composure. You said cooking was your calling, so I put you through the top culinary institute in the elemental nations. Yet here you suspended from school. The voluptuous kunoichi whimpered like a scalded dog. I'm sorry, Daddy. Naruto ignored the fantastic actress and turned his attention back to her husband. I'll take it from here, Headmaster-san. This is a family matter. Fugaku's nodded in submission and then took his leave. His role in this roleplay was to act as a headmaster and lead the Uchiha matriarch to his master, that was it. However, as a cuckold, every fiber of his being was yearning to see how hard his beautiful wife was going to get Ed behind his back. Both his sons were in the guest house Naruto had purchased a few years ago. He was going to join the two since the adulterous couple needed their privacy. Meanwhile, Makoto's huge tits almost popped out of her skin-fitted shirt as she took a massive gulp of oxygen. The blonde began hiking up her skirt by its hem. Every cell in her brain scattered as a gust of cool air collided with the coveted, and very prize between her legs. I can explain, Daddy, cried Makoto as she bunched up her skirt at the front, trying to cover up her indecency. Just let me explain. Explain, snarled Naruto. What is there to explain? You went to school without wearing panties, or you've come home without them. Either way, it's completely unacceptable. His lips thinned into a fierce scowl. You are in so much trouble. She rushed towards him, her hands on his shoulders. Please, Daddy, please. In one fluent motion, the man who she was cheating on her husband with yanked over her his muscular thighs. The pleated skirt she was wearing lifted flawlessly, once again flashing her exquisite treats to the whole world. The first spank was the loudest, and even Fugaku, who was almost out the door, heard it. She let out an anguished cry as the shock and pain triggered a reaction from her cunt. Ripples ran through her gorgeous bubble butt as his firm hand sank into her flesh. Before the stinging pain could fade into the background, he started slapping her so hard that his handprints were becoming engraved on her big, fat. She didn't know whether to babble like a child or to shriek like a harpy. He was assaulting her, treating her like she didn't matter, but that still didn't stop her from thrusting her maternal hips back and forth to him. The pain was white hot, but it only melted into pleasure, blending into something even more intense. Owie. Deciding to give the wife he had stolen the silent treatment, Naruto threw her over his shoulder like she weighed nothing and began making his way downstairs. He could feel his shirt getting wet. The back from her tears and the front from the juices she was leaking. Black strands of luscious silky hair fell over her angelic face as a timid squeak escaped her. His shoulders were getting massaged as her massive tits sank against him. Her legs underwent spasms as the cool air penetrated the parted lips of her glistening, which was on full display since she was wearing no panties underneath her skirt. In 55 seconds his cerulean blue orbs were adjusting to soft teal spotlights. Dark gray was the primary color of the concrete walls, followed by shades of magenta. Parts of the wall held a purplish hue as magenta met teal. Several parts, such as the erotic paintings, the majority being art featuring Sasuke's mother posing provocatively, along with portraits of Naruto and Makoto in different positions, hung up on the wall, held that essence of teal as the spotlights were directed onto them. Despite this seeming to be the work of an artistic visionary, there was an eerie feel to the basement. Light creaking noises occasionally filled the area as the chains dangling down the ceiling swung an inch or two back and forth. The slight rust on the steel confirmed that the chains have been put to good use. Then again, that was bound to happen due to how many times Naruto had bound Makoto with these very chains and ed her with no remorse. A few meters away from the chains sat a patient's bed. A customized table would have worked too, but this hospital-grade patient's bed made it easy for Naruto to strap Sasuke's mother to the mattress and go ape shit on her whenever he pleased. The nightstand beside the bed housed an abundance of items ranging from tie dresses, to butt plugs, to gags, to paddles and leather whips. It was the ultimate MILF training package. To say this part of the basement was a dungeon was an accurate statement. Makoto was a sputtering mess when Naruto roughly set her down. Out of the strength he had yanked from her, though his glare, the remainder was just enough to help her stand on her own 2 feet. She brought her hands to her childbearing hips, cringing at the stinging pain in her tush. Onyx orbs flickered uneasily as he pulled her legs apart and cuffed her with ankle braces that allowed chains to connect to them that went up to the middle of her calves. Once he had secured her wrists with braces as well, she was in his possession and could do nothing about it. Daddy. Fugaku's wife coughed as her son's best friend grabbed her by her black tresses, hauling her to her knees and wrenching her head back to the point she was looking straight up at him. He put a finger to her lips in a shushing gesture, silently commanding her to stay quiet or else. She didn't exactly have the waterworks going, but her lower jaw was trembling. She swallowed the lump in her throat as he trailed his finger down, pulling her lower with him a bit, to run it over the fabric in between her huge tits. Almost immediately after this, Naruto attached the Uchiha matriarch's wrist braces to the chains that were dangling down from the ceiling, and her ankle braces to the chains on the floor. A flash of great panic sent her pulse fluttering as her lover began hitching up her skirt to a height that left her privates no longer private. She squirmed as best as she could, but it was at that moment that her decided that it could no longer stay silent. Thick, rich cream started oozing down her legs and the rest started dripping onto the concrete floor. Cold blue eyes narrowed as the blonde stroked Fugaku's wife's drenched. Do you turn into a every time you go to school? Was all that escaped Itachi's mother as words died down her throat. She was unbelievably horny from this roleplay and being chained up was preventing her from squeezing her thighs together. Besides, how could she play her part when her husband's master was interrogating her with his thumb? He pressed down on the engorged nub like a button, making her mew illy. When she felt he was starting to caress her little one lovingly, he mixed things up by attacking it with painfully light feather touches. Her paw struggled against its bully, but all its efforts were in vain. The metaphorical factory in her cunt had long since begun brewing delicious cream for him. He knew exactly what made her tick, and it didn't help that he was also swiping her folds with his palm. Then he spanked her with his free hand. Tell me, I'm sorry, Daddy, shrieked Makoto. I'm sore. His hand didn't come crashing down on her butt this time. No, his palm hit her right on her labia lips, hard. Come in GGGGG. It first began with a gush followed by some leg shaking. Then it transformed into somewhat of a dance as Makoto started spasming like a woman with Tourette's syndrome. A puddle of feminine juice was steadily accumulating beneath her feet. Her hung jaw looked perfect with her rolled back eyes. Look at yourself, coming all over the floor, voiced Naruto while ing on his fingers, reveling in his servant's wife's sweet nectar. Is that how a modest girl is supposed to act? I'm sorry, Daddy, murmured the dazed Kunoichi, her eyes glossed with lust. She couldn't recall the last time she orgasmed so quick, the yellow flash quick. It made sense during the first few weeks of them getting together, when Naruto could bring her to squirt with just a few touches. For her to come like this, after all these years, with just a love tap to her was unbelievable. Then again, this schoolgirl roleplay was the ultimate taboo fantasy for her, seeing as she was calling Naruto Daddy, when in fact she just today received confirmation, disturbance in her chakra, that she was pregnant with his child. That little tidbit was not known to the blonde mother lover. Rise and shine, sweetheart.